Hello and welcome to SSUC Online Gathering for Sunday, May the 10th. Well, this is our 9th week of gathering digitally online, and I think I speak for many of us when I say that we miss you. We miss the friendship that we have when we gather in person. We miss the conversations. We miss the work that we do together and the energy that it creates when we know we're working together to make a difference in our world. And I'm sure that you feel the same way, that we are together, but we are apart. And so together today, we join in the hopes that we can be together in a way online that gives us comfort, that gives us purpose, that gives us wisdom for moving into another week of what has become a new normal for us in this year of 2020. We're into our second week of tree wisdom, and like a tree that weathers storms, that perseveres through wind and sun and snow and rain and drought, to see the sun and rain and health again, we too will weather this storm. We too will gain strength. We too will find strength where it is revealed. And we'll do that in order to work together to heal our world, to be attentive to the fact that our isolation and our distance has a purpose, and that we will not lose sight of that. We won't complain about it. We will do our part, and we will gain the wisdom and the strength where we can find it. So this morning, welcome. Feel your roots like a tree. Feel those roots in the ground. Feel like a tree that you are stretching to places where you will grow next. Be fed by the love, the wisdom, and the connection that you need today as we're inspired by our friends, the trees, and encouraged by our journeying together.
It's time to light our candles with one another. If yours is nearby, I invite you to light yours with me as we join our light to one another. Light was our first mother. We're all born of that great flaring forth. And as we honor those who have nurtured our lives, those who have mothered us, we honor the long story of light, gracing our lives each day with what makes it possible for us to be here, placing us not too close, not too far from our life-giving sun. As we take these few moments with the light of our candles, we reflect on what it is to be part of a vast, evolving universe. Sherry Ann tells the story of our emergence from light, our long evolutionary journey. She tells it with her creative movement to the music of Carolyn McDade and a phrase from the inspiring document of the Earth Charter: humanity is part of a vast, evolving universe.
as our time for all ages today, a video rendition of a story found in a book called The Sacred Tree, Reflections on Native American Spirituality. In this book, this whole book is introduced with a story entitled The Sacred Tree. And here is a rendering of it done a few years ago.
These are the words of Howard Nemerov in his poem simply entitled Trees. To be a giant and keep quiet about it, to stand in one's own place, to stand for the constant presence of process, and always seem the same, to be steady as a rock and always trembling, having the hard appearance of death with the soft, fluent nature of growth, one's being deceptively armored, one's becoming deceptively vulnerable, to be so tough and take on the light so well, freely providing forbidden knowledge of so many things about heaven and earth, for which we should have no word. Poems or people are rarely so lovely, and even when they have great qualities, they tend to tell you rather than exemplify what they believe themselves to be about. While from the moving silence of trees, whether in storm or calm, in leaf or naked, night and day we draw conclusions of our own, sustaining and unnoticed as our breath, and perilous also, though there has never been a critical tree about the nature of things. In the words of this poet, may we find wisdom for our living.
As trees reach up to the sunlight, as leaves unfurl in the spring, as roots dig deep into history, our lives seek wisdom to sing. This is a glimpse of the journey. This is the hope of our soul. To live more closely as we breathe, connected in one our life long.
There's something warm and comforting to me about the look of weathered raw wood. It may be because I associate it with aged barn boards or the sides of rustic cabins, buildings where people have lived and loved and worked without concern for the appearance of the siding. It may be from the sight of fallen trees in the forest, the staining effects of the sun and rain, or the similarity to the hue and texture of driftwood. Whatever is the reason, in whatever way the soul finds serenity in the familiar, I get comfort from being close to weathered wood. Of all the varieties of wood, the conifers stir my soul the most. The other types of wood, with their richness of color and their varied grains, all have their appeal, but they're not as comforting to my soul as are the knotty surfaces of fir and pine boards. Neither are they as pleasing to the eye as is cedar, nor are they as fragrant. The smell of damp cedar is soul-feeding sensation in my life. I can't be sure where I first made this discovery, but I feel it now every time I encounter it. Since I was raised in a city of steel smelting soot in the air, I find the association of comforting thoughts of my home and the fragrance of wood. How did I get to have that mental and sensory appreciation that I find in woods so nurturing to my soul? Where did that gift originate? Why did it bond me so permanently? I can't answer these questions other than to say that that is the way I respond. Of that I'm certain. It's a fact without explanation. I know how to nurture my soul when I neglect it too long in my busy, crowded life. I know where I need to go, and I know what I need to do to revive it. I go to the evergreen woods and spend some time alone there, just to nurture my soul with the sight and smells of these trees. The scent that wafts in the air of the woods stirs my soul and makes me feel refreshed and revitalized very quickly. I sometimes wonder if I could bottle it up, but no, the scent is only part of the aura. I have a vital need to touch and smell and feel the evergreens. The scent of the leaves in the air makes me feel that I'm in the right place. And it seems like only being in the woods can do that. And they do, even when it's frozen in the ice crystals of winter. Perhaps there's a trace of druid in me, a rich and impressive association with conifers. I cannot recall it at will, at least not now. I don't spend much time pondering the source, but I do acknowledge that it is very nourishing to be in the coastal and mountain forests. I'm blessed not only by this gift, but also by the awareness of what it does for me and of how I can access it.
Let's hear a reading by Parker J. Palmer entitled Their Slow Way. Let these woods have their slow way with you. Patient pines that hold their green through all the frozen seasons. Lichen-covered rocks that live indifferent to time's passage. These will teach you how to bring your life to ground. The fractal chaos of the forest floor, its white anemones, spiked grasses and dead leaves, the fallen trunks and branches splayed out like pickup sticks. These will teach you how to live freely, with abandon, and feed the roots of new growth when your time has come. In these words of a contemporary poet, may we find wisdom for our living.
In these pandemic days, there's so many ways of feeling grounded. There's the punitive sense of being grounded, like a teenager that's being taught a lesson by being separated from our peers. And there's also the traveler sense of being grounded, with our wings clipped, being tethered to home rather than taking flight to any getaways. There's also the sense of being grounded by a fog of uncertainty, a kind of uncertainty that keeps us from seeing anything except the ground right under our feet, from being focused on the statistics that shape the curve today. And it seems to me there's a kind of impatience setting in, a kind of restlessness with a stalled economy and non-essential travel being grounded, borders being closed, activities being limited or laden with prescriptive practices to keep them safer. There's an impatience with restrictions, a restlessness to move on from this time into a post-pandemic world that isn't yet on the horizon. So in our restlessness, what better teacher could there be than a tree? In late February, Don and I spent time in the California redwoods. We've been there several times in the last couple of decades, and yet each time there is something magical that happens when we enter the old-growth forest in Humboldt County. Come with me into that forest. To walk among these ancient trees is to step into one of our oldest and most magnificent cathedrals. You notice how people begin to speak in hushed tones, whispering almost, just as we do in the great cathedrals of the world. There's a depth to the quiet that you can't manage to adequately describe. And you can't even begin to capture the magnificence of these beings on a camera. There's something about being in the presence of these great spiritual giants, these beings that have stood in their place for so long, some of them for more than 2,200 years, reaching up to 350 feet in height as they stretch toward light. They are resilient survivors with few natural enemies. Even a fire is seldom fatal for a redwood. They're possessed of amazingly shallow roots, but they grow laterally. 100 feet or more, they intertwine and graft into one another, helping to hold each other up. Even the death of a tree is the birth of a log that becomes a nursery for as many as 4,000 species. That diversity of species is essential to the health of old-growth forest. To be a giant and keep quiet about it. To stay in one's own place, to stand for the constant presence of process and always seem the same, to be as steady as a rock and always trembling, having the hard appearance of death with the soft, fluent nature of growth, to be so tough and take on the light so well, freely providing forbidden knowledge of so many things about heaven and earth. There's a mystery in this place where so much life comes from so much silence, where so much growth comes out of such stillness. In the world of our stories, the forest is home to the magical and the mysterious, to the experiences of becoming lost and found, often by the quirkiest of characters. It's the place where our characters meet adventure. They confront good and evil. They emerge to live differently in the world, ever after. The forest in the world of literature is often the place where you get lost for a time. Find companionship with the most magical of characters. And when you return to your life, you are forever changed. It's the place where you lose yourself and find yourself again. It's a spirited place where we confront our deepest fears and we're changed. And we come back re-enchanted. There was a time when the forest was home to our ancestors, a time when more of humanity lived in an intimate relationship with forest, when our relationship with the forest was more immediate, when the spirituality of trees was accessible to us. Now we have to go into the woods or bring something of the woods into our homes. Maybe that's why we plant our children's first grade trees in our yard. We preserve parkland in our cities. We preserve green spaces, hints of our need to be in relationship with trees that have so much to teach us. I think there's great wisdom in the editor's choice of opening and closing the wisdom narratives of the Jewish Christian tradition in a garden. Even in these stories that open the book of Genesis and close the book of Revelation, if we were to clear our eyes of the clutter of centuries of misinterpretation, even here, we would see that the trees are our teachers. As the ancient story goes, depicted as it is in this painting from 1615, the Creator formed the earthling, the human, from the dust of the ground and breathed into this new being the breath of life, and the earth creature became a living being. And then the Creator planted a garden in Eden and placed the human one there. Out of the ground, the Creator made every tree to grow that is pleasant to the eye and good to eat. The tree of life in the middle of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In this creation myth, the trees are primal. And in the story, the tree and the human are formed of the same substance from the soil, from the ground. Some centuries later, our science has told us that our instinct was right. We are actually all composed of the same residue of that great flaring forth. We are all made of stardust. The only difference between you and me and the rocks and the trees is the way in which the oxygen and carbon and hydrogen and nitrogen is arranged. And according to the ancient story, the trees were inspiring, instructive, entrusted with the task of instructing the human in what was good and what was the antithesis of good. After the element of water, the trees were the first living thing in the story for the human to be in relationship with. And according to the myth, it was from the trees that humanity would learn the wisdom on which life depends, discerning between good and evil. Native Americans call the trees standing people. They share vertical life, as we see in this picture you'll see on the screen. They share vertical life with us, but unlike us, they remain in the same place from birth to death. Trees hold their ground, have much to teach us about bringing our life to ground. Staying grounded requires ingenuity, adaptation, and a capacity for serenity. I have yet to meet a restless tree. Persistent, for sure, Creative? Absolutely. Ingenious? In countless ways. Just consider the shape of trees as they contort themselves to get a share of the sunlight. They have to sink or stretch their roots vertically or laterally to find the moisture they need for survival while maintaining their place. They can't migrate like other beings for better soil, for an easier path to survival. Trees have learned to live large despite constraints. They have all kinds of rich relationships with their own species and with so many other beings that seek out their shelter or their nurture, all of which they offer while they are absolutely, totally, and utterly grounded. Isn't this the challenge of our time? To be standing people, to let the woods have their slow way with us. These patient teachers are all around us. They would teach us to bring our restless lives to ground in such a way that we too can live largely despite constraints, that we can trust the wisdom deep within us and grow still enough and calm enough and long enough to know what we know. Let us open to ponder our place and know where we can bring our lives to ground in ways that will grow soil, right where we are grounded, in this time and in this place. As we consider the roots that hold us close and the wings that set us free, we might choose to sing along with this virtual version of Spirit of Life, words we have sung together many times, words that are sung by a virtual choir from All Souls Unitarian in Washington, D.C. If your Spanish is really good, you can join them the first time around. If it's not so good, you can wait for the English the second time around. We thank you for all the ways that you continue to support our life and work as a community, a spiritual community based in South Edmonton and in Saskatoon. You can support us financially by dropping off a check to the church on Thursday morning between 10 and 1. There's a box in the foyer that would be happy to receive your cash or checks at that time. You can donate anytime online. You can order grocery cards by emailing the office or by calling the office and picking those up on Thursdays. You can mail us a check anytime. And we express our gratitude to so many of you who support us weekly or monthly by your pre-authorized remittances that give us stability to meet our commitments month by month. We invite you to join us in conversation tomorrow at 3 as we gather face-to-face each Monday for some time of conversation with one another. You receive the Zoom link in your e-messenger on Fridays. If for some reason you didn't receive it or would like to be in on our conversation tomorrow, you'll see on on your screen a few ways that you can contact us. We'd be happy to get a link to you so you can join us tomorrow at 3. We're also happy to receive a few pictures of trees, or those of you that might have a story of a special place in the forest or a special tree that has you have a relationship with in your life. As you can see this morning, Charles shared a story with us. We welcome those video stories. We welcome receiving some images that we will place each week in the projection that you see. And we appreciate very much those who have contributed their images that we have utilized today. And at the close of our time with one another, you'll see their names listed.
As we close our gathering time today, I want to send a few other thank yous out and acknowledge the help that we've had in this place this morning. Thanks to our musicians this morning, to Deb and Dawn and Janet and Anne. These moments of music are incredibly meaningful to all of us, and thank you for the feedback that you've offered and the gratitude and thanks to them. Also to Brett and to Darian in the booth this morning who've made all of this possible. As we go into our day and take the wisdom that we have found in our friends the trees, in the wisdom of the poets, in the wisdom of music and song and singing, we go from this place knowing that our strength is within us, deeply grounded, and our strength to move on forward in our day and in the days ahead is to be found, weathered, bent but not broken, strong in us and through us. And so as we change the light and we go from our time, may the peace and the love and the strength go with you, and may you find it in each and every day this week. Happy Sunday to you.